Hey Isaac,
Hey, how's it going?
pretty good. How you doing?
All right, hanging tough, hanging tough. Yeah, yeah. What's cooking with you?
Oh, not much. I just drove back from Northampton, so it was
Oh,
record
okay.
time. Yeah,
Nice, nice.
minutes to spare.
Yeah.
How is your summer going?
Pretty good. Things are starting to calm down with work a little bit, which is nice.
That is always nice.
So, yeah, so I'll have a little bit more time to actually get outside, which is good.
Cool. That is good. Have you gone away at all? Or you're planning to?
We were in Maine for a week. That was like the end of June. And I think we'll probably take a couple days here and there, but nothing really long.
Little
How about
getaway
you?
is good.
Yeah.
Um, I, I was just away last week at the beach, which was good, except it was a little rainy, so that was a drag.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and then we're going on a road trip later in August, which I've been wanting to do for a long time.
Where are you
So.
going?
Out to Colorado, then maybe up to Wyoming or South Dakota, but like
Oh, wow. How long? Like a couple weeks?
3 weeks.
Oh,
So
excellent.
yeah, it's been forever since I've gone that long. So long overdue.
Excellent.
You know. Hi Stephen, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm good, thanks.
Good. I think we are all coming in here. There's Nate. Cool.
In the blue mist.
It
Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening here, but I'll work on that.
Looks very ethereal.
looks very cool. Yeah. Well, why don't I call us to order and we can start jumping in. So I'll call us to order 5:03, and Nate is going to take minutes for us this time and not Gail. So thank you for doing that switch. Um,
Thank you. Thank you.
and I want to officially welcome Stephen to our discussion today. It's greatly appreciated that you're joining us. Um, Looking forward to that. And I'm not sure, Joseph, I'm not sure who Joseph is, but I'm
How
assuming
you doing?
good. Joseph, what's your last name?
Salvador.
Okay. Um, so this is a time for public comments. I just wanted to offer up if you have public comments you want to share, if you were just willing, just wanted to listen in or
Well, I've been trying to listen into some of the stuff. I've dealt with doing a stretch code lately,
okay.
and I can give you my honest opinion. I just don't see the value of how they figure out what they give you in incentives unless you go all electric.
Further,
That's the only problem I see with dealing with the stretch codes is, and that dealing with a couple of houses I've done is, one is if you go all electric, you get some really good incentives back. You get good money. But if you have to put any gas or anything as a backup, and being in Shutesbury, as we lose power more often than we would like, it's you got to have alternative forms of heat, and because of that, you lose so much of the points on it. That's um, and then the other part of it. Let me just shut this thing off. Sorry about that.
okay.
The other part of it is um, they make it so energy efficient that you're running a fan 24/7 in order to justify having it so well insulated, which I always found another thing that core doesn't really work. It doesn't seem like it balances out with air handlers. I've seen problems with some of the houses, not mine, but other houses, where they make them so energy efficient. They put an air handler in. The person leaves and the air handler is running. It draws cold air in the wintertime, and they come back to find their windows all frozen.
It sounds like you're somewhat in the trades, that you're familiar with this stuff.
Familiar with it, and the idea is good. I'm not saying the idea is bad, but there's no really good money coming back to you for what you're trying to get out of it. That's just what I see of it.
Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate the comments. I know that, so just for your info, Later in the agenda, we're going to start talking about the climate leader program, of which the opt-in stretch code is a part. So I'm not sure if we're going to get into the nitty gritty of that conversation. We had, let's see, we're in the end of July, so probably in the spring leading up to town meeting, we had a bunch of conversation about the opt-in stretch code.
Right.
Assuming that we're going to bring it to town meeting, I'm pretty confident that we'll, if not this meeting, we'll have other meetings that will talk about the detail, because I think we want to be responsive to, concerns and be able to either definitely understand it, figure out if there's a way of making sure that, people feel comfortable with it. So if we don't get to the conversation of the detail today, which I sort of think we probably won't, like it might be a little bit higher level about the climate leader program, I would say just follow, we meet every month. So follow the agenda, because there'll be a time where we can sort of dig in more deeply. But Nate's taking notes, and I think also has done a lot of research on this.
Well, I think a few of your members already know me.
Okay.
And I actually, you're good. You have a good crew on your group there, so that's not a problem. I'm just giving you my opinion on it from someone who's had to spend the money to make the code, only to make, if it ain't bad, but to make it where it doesn't really, do what it's supposed to do on my end. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I would say, being that we're a town committee and we would be doing this for the town, it's important to actually create the time. So, it's great that you're mentioning it now, but I don't discount your input. I think, when we get to that point,
Bring out my builder friends.
Yeah, it's better to hear it now than later. Stephen, did you want to jump in?
Yes, Joe and I know each other, and we built our house, it was finished in 2018. And we're actually all electric, except for our propane cooktop. And so, we have a HRV, heat recovery ventilator, which initially was programmed to run 24/7, essentially. We reprogrammed it to run 20 minutes out of an hour. And the intent is obviously so that you don't oxygen starve the house, because it's now so tight. And, I think, I want to hear what Joe thinks about this. If you go away for a period of time, in my opinion, there's no need for you to run the HRV, because no one's living in there breathing the air. And actually, we went away several weeks ago, and I thought, why run the HRV? I mean, it's only going to bring in hot, humid air. So we turned it off while we were away, turned it back on when we came home. And I would see, doing the same thing in the winter. If you're not living there, turn it off. And when you come back, to use the property, then you turn it on. What do you think of that, Joe?
I think that's a good idea, but I'm not positive, and I don't want to be quoted, but I think when you apply for it, it's programmed to do it 24/7. It's like some people take their fans and they change them, but to do the program, I think it's designed that way. We know somebody else who went through the whole thing. They energy their house. When they burn their wood stove in their fireplace, they have to open a window in order to draw enough air to feed the fireplace.
Right.
So you're drawing all that cold air in order to burn the fireplace to burn it out. So if you want to have anything burning with wood, which is another, like, okay, it's energy efficient, but I have to open a window now. So you're drawing cold air. So you make sure when you're sitting in the living room, you don't sit on that corner.
Yeah, I will say, not being an expert in this stuff, in many things, living in a place like Shutesbury, where, like we don't have reliable energy necessarily, or we're small and rural, some of the designs and requirements don't always match, the requirements. So I think it's important to sort of go in with eyes open and understand what that really means. Well, I'm gonna move us along at the agenda, but Joe, stick around if you want to just listen and totally pay attention to the agenda, because we will dig in, if not tonight, another time. But so I want to shift gears and just sort of welcome Stephen. I think the goal is to have a conversation, just to frame it. We've been trying to figure out how to advance clean energy for the town buildings for, I think, 2 years at this point. You know, we've looked at solar, we've not looked at solar, we've gone back to solar, we've looked at heat pumps. And Gail, I think coming off of the all-town meeting, but at some point said we should talk to the building committee, which is a duh, but brilliant at the same time. And so I think, Gail, thank you for, making the connection and sort of, I don't know, do you want to share anything based on your thinking about this, Gail, before we jump into a conversation?
Well, it just struck me that as the Energy Committee, we're looking for funding for energy efficiency in town, and we went through solar and blah, blah, blah. But anything that goes for the buildings, we would have to know status of the buildings. Well, we don't know that. The Building Committee, on the other hand, is looking at improving the status of all the municipal buildings. And I would assume, and Stephen, correct me for that energy efficiency would be part of that future plan, increasing energy efficiency. And certainly the Building Committee knows more than we do about the status of individual buildings. Stephen, first of all, we're talking about net zero across the 5 municipal buildings, not in any one given or in every one given building. Clearly, there's impossible situations in some of those buildings. But one of the things that's up on the current Green Communities grant program is installation of heat pumps. Solar is not included this year, so that solves a whole bunch of problems that we were looking at. But heat pumps is something that is going to be varied by building, and you all are going to know about that. I wondered if we can get a collaboration of information that we could use in an application for green community funding for installation of heat pumps.
And I guess I'll just jump in with one other thing, Stephen, and then you should just run with it and share what you know. But I think the other thing we've run across in the last year and a half, because we've been struggling with trying to get grant money. And we've also gone to the FinCom and said, can we have, some kind of reserve so we have enough money to be able to do a little research to apply. And I think what's become clear is in order to get grant money, we have to do the research. We have to sort of have something in place, whether we're going to the state for a grant, the FinCom to make a request, put something in the queue for capital, planning, all of those things. We sort of need people in town who know what the real deal is. And it seems like if we're going to be doing stuff with buildings, the building committee is probably that entity. So I think we're coming to you because this is what you guys are paying attention to. So I don't know if you want to give us a rundown or tell us what you think, however you want to sort of start the conversation.
Well, I thought I'd just sort of introduce what the building committee is doing, has done. And, I have to say, I think, collaboration between us and the Energy and Climate Action Committee is a good idea. So in the, I think it was the fall of 2022, the building committee was reformed. I became chairman, and our first charge from the select board was to come up with condition reports on the buildings because they had none. And I have a 40-year career in my past as a building inspector in the Baltimore metropolitan area. So I was able to sort of lead the way to first develop a spreadsheet for us to use to inspect the buildings. And then also because of my experience, I've been primarily the inspector. And, we're gradually moving through the buildings, but, emergencies come up, and we've had 2 big projects. Last summer we had the roof replaced, the asphalt shingle roof replaced on the elementary school. And then this summer we're having the building painted after having a considerable amount of rotted trim and siding replaced. In both those projects, we've had a consultant working with us to develop the contract, which goes on for many, 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 many pages. And last year with the school, we actually had them also take care of progress meetings and inspections. But this year we decided that we could handle the progress meetings and the inspections. And I and Jeff Quackenbush, who is retired from UMass as I refer to it as staff architect, for quite some time. He and I have been doing most of that because we're both retired. We can zip up there and look at things. So, that project now is, I guess I'd say, good 3/4 finished. And, that'll finish up hopefully by the beginning of the school year, as long as the weather permits. And then, I can get back to inspecting more. And we've done, some small repair projects. And I have a couple of volunteers who have helped in some. And I don't know if you all have tried to coordinate any projects, but one of the things I've learned is, finding somebody that can do the project, and then you have to get other estimates, and it's such a tangled mess in a lot of ways. It takes forever. So it's been great having a volunteer for some of these projects. We're able to get some of these things done quickly and with very little expense. And like we have a budget. We are getting 40,000 this year, but we could very easily spend that once we finish the inspections and identify what we feel are the real priority items to deal with first, and we'll just slowly continue. Gail had sent me several weeks ago the energy efficiency checklist for municipal buildings, which I think is a wonderful thing. But at this point, that's not something we're trying to deal with. Although at town hall, when I did the inspection, I was there in some of the warmer months, and the heating boiler was maintaining temperature. And, I asked Becky, I said, why is this maintaining temperature? So, she then at some point had the contractor that has been taking care of it, Jamrog, come out, and the gentleman said, oh, no, there's an outside temperature sensor and yada, yada, yada. It's not going to run, when the temperature is too high. Well, I don't think that's actually the case. Unfortunately, I wasn't there because I think I would have had more questions for him. And I just need to verify that because, again, a month or so ago, I was up there and, the boiler's at like 145 degrees. So I said, Becky, we can turn this off. You don't need heat. You don't need to have this thing on standby. So again, I mean, here the professional, in my opinion, isn't really aware of what the condition is. And when you question them on it, they're saying that, oh no, it's fine. So, some of these things might involve finding other contractors who are more adept at what they're supposed to be doing.
Responsive.
Yes. So then, just jumping in a little, Gail and I had talked about, heat pumps, and heat pumps are good. They have a lot of value. I mean, that's what we have for our house. But any heat pump, when it gets down below 32 degrees outside temperature, they start to lose efficiency. So actually, in say a case like Town Hall, which has a oil-fired hot water boiler, you could marry a heat pump to that system and then have an outside controller that would switch from the heat pump to the boiler when you hit 32 degrees outside temperature. And probably, I think the elementary school, I think that's also, we haven't inspected that at all, but I think that's also an oil-fired boiler, much more complicated system, but still it would be a similar approach, I think, where you would marry the two and end up with, say, the best efficiency overall. And the other thing about, heat pumps in older buildings tend to be drafty, and heat pumps the supply temperature is not a hot temperature like it would be with, say, hot water or forced air. So drafty buildings aren't the best candidates for heat pumps. But if you had a heat pump that was switching off at 32 degrees, it would be less noticeable. But the biggest bang for the buck is air sealing and insulation. Sometimes, retrofitting that in an existing building. I mean, air sealing in terms of exterior caulking and things like that is easy to do, but within the wall cavity, that's not an easy thing to do. So sometimes there's a difficulty in that.
Yeah.
So
Stephen,
yes,
oh, before we can make any application for a green community grant for
Mhm.
energy efficiency in these buildings, we have to show that the weatherization steps that the auditor suggested 2 years ago have actually taken place. And that's the report that Becky is preparing now. Whether or not that included, or as you and I talked about it, floor drafts, yes. I don't know if it included the what you just mentioned, the ceiling and overhead kind of insulation.
I
Is
mean,
that
in the attic space.
yes. Is that something you can determine from the work done?
Yeah, I've been in the attic of the town hall, and I'd have to look in the report, but there is a fair amount of cellulose, blown-in cellulose. The access scuttle has been insulated and weather stripped, so the scuttle is very tight. Um, so there have definitely been some past improvements in that attic, and I want to say I'd have to look, but there's a substantial amount of blown-in cellulose.
Gail, is it mass save for municipalities or is it a different program? The weatherization.
That was we had the auditor come in and their recommendation would you do the weatherization that was done by, it's a subgroup from National Grid.
Yeah, I mean, so like Mass Save is the state program, and then they have vendors underneath that.
Yes,
All of it's funded by the utilities. But I was just wondering if, like, for residences, if you want to do weatherization and improvements and efficiencies, you
right,
go through Mass Save, and then they hook
correct.
you up with the vendor. So I'm just wondering, is Mass Save also the program under which the municipal weatherization happens, or is it a different program?
I gotta think it's a different program.
Okay, we should probably figure that out. Okay.
That should be in the rubric of the audit report, though.
Okay, we can look. Sorry to interject. Yeah. I think, Stephen, one thing I'm sort of like to frame this a little bit, in the conversations we've had, like again, it was initially solar, now heat pumps and et cetera, but it seems like some of the variables are what's the cost benefit, like where would you start? So if you can do weatherization and have good bang for your buck, that's an easier sell to the town and we could get it done and we would see benefits. And then there's also sort of the condition of the building. Like, one of the things that Gail did some investigation on somewhere in the last year was could we put solar on, some of the roofs, like on the highway department. And the question was, the roof might need to get replaced, so you wouldn't want to invest in solar on that roof. And so there's understanding like based on the building, where do we want to put large investments or just sort of prioritize other buildings, or it's a mix and match approach. And I think we're operating mostly blind at this point. So I mean, I think one of the goals would be to figure out what's the roadmap. Like if we were to go to the town, sort of similar to like how capital planning has a multi-year list that we could say, well, we should do weatherization on these two buildings because it's low cost and high impact. We could do a big project if we get a grant for this thing. And then we should wait 5 years because the roof has to get replaced or whatever. But, some kind of strategy map. We are totally deficient in having that as far as I can tell.
Does
Does that
the
make
building
sense?
committee, Stephen, does the building committee have future plannings for each of these 5 buildings?
Well, since we haven't completed, all the inspections,
Right,
We haven't tried to, I'll say, develop a master plan.
right.
But I know we've talked about both in town hall and the old town hall, there are some, I'll say, reasonably significant deficiencies in the electrical components. Both those buildings still have a couple of fuse boxes. In town hall, one of the electrical panels is quite antiquated. And then there's, I'll say, a certain amount of electrical house cleaning. Um, we're thinking that it would be prudent that all the buildings have a surge protector on the incoming electrical service, because I think a few years ago when there was some electrical event, some of the mini splits and other equipment got fried or
Oh,
components got fried. Um, so we're thinking, that when we're at a point where we can start identifying where we want to spend money first,
mhm,
some electrical improvements might be first. I mean,
mhm.
fortunately, the highway department got some money, and they just had their electrical panel improved. But a simple thing is, so at the highway department, every electrical receptacle in that building, because they have a concrete slab, should have ground fault protection. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
None of the receptacles, maybe in the bathroom, but none of the ones in the, say, workspace where the uh, dump trucks are stored, none of those are ground faulted.
Oh,
So there are numerous things like that that, aren't in the scheme of things that expensive, but, that's how you
But
lose life.
but if those things have energy efficiency output, are they applicable to the grant? We could go back to the grant application and see if that kind of beefing up, bringing up to date, it would even be part of a application for funding.
Well, I'm going to guess and say that adding or switching out to LED lighting would certainly be something that would fall within the parameters of getting grant for. But as far as switching out from a standard three-prong grounded receptacle to a GFCI,
That's not.
I wouldn't see that, or any of the other electrical things. Those are all more, I'd say, safety related, and not going to save you money.
That's not energy. Okay.
I mean, the surge protector could certainly save money in the right circumstances, but again, I don't think it's a energy saving
Right.
component.
Thank
There is
you.
a benefit, I think, in terms of the collaboration that if we just say, for example, went forward with the LED lighting, that if there's a requirement to upgrade, or an opportunity where you have to upgrade the wiring in order to achieve the LED plan, then we'd be remiss not to be coordinating.
Right. But I don't think switching out, like say a fluorescent tube fixture with an
Yeah.
LED fixture requires any additional wiring improvements.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
agree.
it makes sense.
Yeah.
Certainly if you were gonna, if you're gonna put a heat pump in, depending on the size that's needed, that would have a greater draw and might involve some electrical improvements, which maybe then you could piggyback for that. Certainly, putting something in at, say, town hall that would piggyback with the existing heating system, or say at the elementary school. Somebody would have to do a load calculation of the existing building and then determine what the additional load requirements would be if you put in a heat pump.
Okay. Gail, I don't know if you've thought of this. I mean, if we were proceed with something, the load calculation sort of made me think about it. Like, I'm wondering if we reached out to you, Stephen, and we said, okay, we actually see an opportunity to go after something. It seems like it would make sense to reach out and say, does anyone on the building committee either have the expertise to do something like that, or can you point us to a vendor that you feel comfortable with? Since, I think among the four of us, it's just going to be personal knowledge. Maybe not professional at all.
Right. I would defer to a knowledgeable licensed electrician. You can sometimes, I mean, from my experience inspecting homes and what I would see in terms of total service and the various large draw units throughout the house, get a sense of, oh, you may be undersized on your total electrical service, and you should have this checked out further. But that would be kind of the extent of it. I don't know that I've never tried to educate myself on how to do a load calculation, but I don't think it's actually that hard. A lot of people think you see an electrical panel, you open it up and you count the breakers in terms of, if you have, say, 15 amps, so you multiply 5 times 15 and you have 230s, those are 60. Well, it doesn't work that way. It's all percentage.
Yeah.
Like there's square footage, use the square footage to get your base of the building to get a basic amount needed for, say, lights and receptacles. And then for larger components, they each have a value, and it's never what is on the breaker. The breaker, in a lot of cases, a lot of things, when they start up, there's a significant draw. But then when they're running, which is established very shortly after that, it drops down to a much lower level.
Isaac, Nate, do you guys have any questions or comments about this stuff?
You're muted.
Yeah, I think, one of my reflections is that, when something breaks, say it's, your hot water supply for a municipal building, or, a furnace reaches the end of its life, the clock starts ticking, right? I mean, your ability to utilize a building, might be compromised there. So, what we've read about communities working towards swapping out fossil fuel technologies to greener technologies that are going to bring us in line for the state's 2050 net zero goals, is that it really is important to have a plan in place and not be caught flat-footed, when that clock pressure is there, because there may be a need for, as we're talking about, the electrical systems that are in place. If we're going to be doing electrical work, are we setting the table such that that electrical panel is going to be powered to electrify that building in the future, right? And not just meet the current needs. So, as you're talking about, finishing a review of the municipal buildings, conducting those inspections, maybe really getting a better handle on what the needs are, what the priorities are. It seems like, these other considerations, might graft onto that review. So I think one of the things that we've struggled with a little bit is, and Michael, I think articulated this well, is, where do you start? Yeah, that was just my one of my reflections is, it really is important to have a plan. So, yeah, I think.
And that would have everything to do, Stephen, with priorities that the committee would be drawing up on these buildings.
Right. I mean, as the comment was being made, I was thinking, well, that would be a very good, consideration when upgrading things or improving things at Town Hall and Old Town Hall. I mean, currently at Old Town Hall, there's the only main draw is there's a heat pump they have a vault where there are records that need to be kept locked up. They have a very small mini split keeping that cooled and heated. The rest of the building right now is not being heated or cooled because the old furnace is defective. There's no water supply to the building now, so it's not a concern so much that the rest of the building is not heated or cooled. There is a dehumidifier, and those eat up the the dollars that runs constantly in the summer because there are all these other records stored in Old Town Hall. So
We had a whole demolding process.
yeah,
Because all,
right. Well, and earlier, I think when Joe was talking about, the other thing I had thought about is, in Town Hall, they had a mold problem a number of years ago. And one of the things that they did in conjunction, I think, with having a dehumidifier back in the sort of the storage room, I'll call it, behind the meeting room, they also put in a heat recovery ventilator, which runs 24/7. And again, that building is a drafty building.
Yeah.
So the question is, does that need to be run, say in the winter months when the humidity is typically low?
No.
And, maybe not. So there's things like that going through and talking about those from an energy use standpoint, and possibly putting a mini split in the old town hall to eliminate the need for the dehumidifier because the mini split's going to be a lot more economical to operate and it can keep the building, at a cool temperature and keep it dehumidified. So that would be a reason because the service there is 100 amps at the old town hall, and not knowing what's going to happen to Old Town Hall in the future, maybe having 200 amps would make sense. And it's not that much more expensive when replacing a panel to go to 200 amp service over 100 amp service.
cool. Well, I want to sort of shift us to other agenda items, but I want to end with a question, which is, it seems like we should be in communication going forward. And I don't know how often the building committee meets or and therefore what the best way of doing that is. I mean, Gail, if you're happy being sort of the liaison with Stephen, that might be a good approach just to make sure. But it seems like we should be, as you're discovering things or coming up with ideas, or that we should just be checking with each other. But is that ring true to you?
Yes, I mean, I think, when the buildings are inspected to the point where we can start prioritizing and talking about where we want to spend money, then I think it'd be good to have joint meeting and everybody can chime in and hopefully we come up with the best, most economical solution for the issues, and so that they don't end up biting us in the rear sometime down the future because we didn't think of, oh my God, if we'd only done this, we would have saved ourselves a lot of headaches.
Yeah.
Do you have any guesstimate as to when that might be, Stephen?
Hopefully, I don't know about the elementary school, but certainly by the end of the summer, I think we'll have the rest of the buildings finished. I have to finish. I'm almost finished the fire department except for the attic. I'm waiting for cooler weather for that. And I have to go through Old Town Hall and finish that up and hopefully get into the crawl space in there. So hopefully by, because we're getting close to the end of this painting project. And I've spent, along with Jeff, quite a bit of time. Oh, and for some reason, I don't know why, but we didn't have in our contract that the painters would paint the doors. There are a number of doors, like I think they're emergency doors from classrooms, and they're solid metal and they're painted the same trim color. So Jeff and I are going to paint the doors.
I'm sure the sixth graders would love to help you.
Yeah.
We'll keep that in mind.
Okay, yeah.
Creative.
God.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank Gail, you for sort of bringing it up, and Stephen for you joining us, because I think this is invaluable. The one thing I was going to say, just before I forget, when we come up with the plan, I think I can speak for us, so we happily go hand in hand to the FinCom or the select board or
Sure.
whoever to sort of, make the case from both perspectives that,
Yeah.
whatever the plan is the coordinated message is just more powerful.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
So you're not aiming at the green communities application at all then, Michael? We don't know enough yet to get there?
It feels like that. I mean, if there's something that you think we should consider that's low hanging fruit that requires less research and we can sort of jump into, I think we can go for it. But I'm sort of, it also seems like there's new programs that are sort of over the horizon, DOER. And so, because it seems like if I remember correctly, the director of Green Communities at one of these webinars in the last month or two was talking about some new program that they're rolling out. So I don't know. I mean, is there something that you think would be a reasonable scope?
Well, Becky has said that whatever gets proposed, there's still that chunk of the LEDs at the school, that project has not been finished. And Nate, that was one thing that we thought you might be able to bring up to and I've forgotten now the name of that organization that.
Yeah, I'm not sure which organization.
It was a funding grant opportunity
Yes.
through the school.
Yeah. So I mean, I did attend a webinar on green schools. It's a new line of funding. And if it's a DOER program though, and I think the webinar might have been facilitated by
Okay.
more of an NGO, but yeah, I mean that line of funding seems extremely flexible in terms of how you might use it. So I can forward along to this group and the building committee sort of the recorded webinar and other resources that were circulated after that meeting that I attended.
No, I think that'd be great. The other thing, I'm assuming the principal is still getting settled, but maybe somewhere in the middle of the fall after the school year starts, we can invite her to a discussion. I don't know, have you met with her, Nate, at all?
I have not. But like if the furnace goes out, it's like a building committee's court.
Yeah.
So there's like coordination. It's sort of like a little bit of three legs of a stool, maybe, but it's definitely, as I understand it, squarely with building committee. So.
Yeah, when we've had furnace problems in the past, the school, it's the building committee that has showed up, and Jamrock is the vendor for that as well, over the course of decades. I don't know his role. I feel like the owner of Jamrock lives in Shutesbury and West Pelham, but someone with Jamrock lives on West Pelham, who stops by. I know he came to our house a few years ago for something, but I think he's the one who services the school, probably town hall as well. But I couldn't remember his
I
name.
think that's true.
And, so Gail, I think at this point, unless there's something really obvious, maybe when's the deadline for the grant? I forgot.
October.
Oh, plenty of time.
But before that, October 16th, but before that, the report of completion of the weatherization has to have been made by August 16th, 26th, around in there somewhere, mid-August.
And that's Becky's.
That's Becky's plate. Yeah.
Okay. So if that does not happen, then we're not free to proceed. Sounds
Well,
like.
and that's going to depend, whatever it is she reports on the weatherization is I don't know if she's kept the buildings committee appraised of that or not, Stephen?
Well, I think some of the application and funding for that took place maybe before I was involved with the committee. And I do know that at some point, I don't know if it was earlier this year or late last year, I remember the work crew being at town hall. I remember them being, I think, at the elementary school and also at the highway department, and they could have easily been at the other town buildings. I mean, I guess really the only other one would be the fire department. But there was evidence, physical evidence that they had been there, as well as I saw the workers once or twice on site. So I would think that Becky has records for that, but
Right.
I don't have any direct information about it.
Cool. Great. Well, we're ready to shift gears to CCA. So we covered the turf for now.
I have one last question.
Oh,
So
please.
with these grants, I'm assuming that it's for, say, improvements, upgrades, new equipment, like first time installation of a
Correct.
heat pump, not a replacement of one that's old.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. I think I sent you the narrative for the grant application. If not, I can send it again.
Well,
You may have, but I didn't. That I didn't print out. I printed out the energy efficiency checklist because I think it's something that would be good after we finish the
Right.
basic inspection of the buildings, trying to go through and pay some attention to that.
It sounds like we'd be putting pressure on ourselves if we're aiming at a grant. This cycle with all these unknowns, that we'd be better off to develop a plan and future steps based on what you're finding and the priorities your committee is coming up with. Does that sound?
That makes sense to me. Yes.
Yeah.
and they make us more competitive as well when we apply.
Yeah. You mean we'll know what we're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. A minor point, but yes.
How about that?
Cool. Good. Well, Steven, feel free to stick around, but thank you very much for this. It's hugely
You're welcome.
appreciated.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you have a meeting where you think be good for me to participate, let me know, and I'll do the same.
Great. Thank you. Sounds
Okay.
terrific.
I'm going to sign off. Good
Okay.
night.
Have a good night.
Good night.
And Nate, you are up next for CCA.
Great.
Change the agenda.
No, that's super. There are, a couple, there's movement on a couple of fronts with regard to CCA. So I think, the first and maybe most exciting thing is that we've got an executed contract with Colonial Power Group. We got all the signatures. I circulated that to the committee.
Yeah.
And, shortly after, we were able to tie a bow on that, Colonial suggested that instead of rushing ahead through a process of formulating an aggregation plan, that given what has been happening at DPU with regard to municipal aggregation, that's something that I've reported on in the past, this sort of legislative movement, and then how is DPU responding to that? Colonial suggested that we let some of that dust settle, perhaps. So one of the things that I included in the message with the executed contract attached to it is a press release from DPU that addresses this. So they have issued an order, and it adopts uniform guidelines for approving future municipal aggregation plans. The press release also indicates that through the process of adopting these guidelines, that they were able to clear a lot of the backlog
Okay.
that had been in place, which I think bodes well for us in terms of the timeline for our adoption of a plan. And so Colonial, they're actually going to be meeting on Friday with DPU and other aggregator folks to talk about the template for submitting a plan. So one of the sort of pieces of input from Colonial was that DPU is receiving multiple plans from communities across the state that were effectively the same, but with very, very minor differences. And DPU seemed to be approaching each document as though it were, did not exist in a context of, for previously approved plans, other things that are being reviewed in their inbox. So the hope is that on Friday, Colonial and others, they'll have this conversation, that a very clear understanding of what DPU needs to be in a standardized plan that'll emerge, and that'll benefit us substantially as we put together our own plan.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited about that. I think one of the main things to highlight is the 120-day turnaround that is in the guidelines, and what, just like to land the plane of this update. One of my what I wanted to suggest is, I don't know, it would be great to have Colonial kind of join one of our future meetings, maybe our next one, so that they can kind of bring the whole committee like up to speed on kind of what the latest is, and things that we might either like just actively discuss or queue up for discussion amongst ourselves, so that when it's go time, we have a some sense of the committee of like what direction to go, or what things we need to be ready for, if you will. So yeah, that's my CCA update.
Cool. Thank you, Nate. I have a question, but does anyone else have any questions? So the one just on that last point you made, it seems to me now that we've got Colonial on board, the next task for us in conjunction with them is to sort of come up with what the menu of options might be, so they can then ground truth it and also get some rate information behind it. Is that sort of the next logical step for us?
I think so. It may not be too soon to provide that feedback, right? So, I mean, based on the experience of other towns, I expect them to come with, it's kind of like a matrix of options, like X% of this, X% of that. But we as a committee, we've talked about maybe some bespoke elements that we might want to introduce, specifically with regards to the sourcing of some of the electricity. I would love to know, like I have questions, I can ask them directly, but just what are the prospects for accessing some of the offshore wind electrons in our portfolio, those kinds of things. So yeah, I think it's probably not too soon to have that dialogue with them for sure.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
Do we also want to consider at some point the length of our contract, given future thought about joining an existing CCA, namely the Conway group or the Pelham?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's there are the sort of the market considerations that affect like the duration, the sensible
Right.
duration of a contract, but then some of these other uh, possible futures for sure would be good to bring up. Although I would say like we asked about is there value for an individual community um, to join a larger group?
Right.
And Colonial seemed a little they weren't discouraging at all, and that's kind of their overall approach is to respond that way. But they seem to advise that the the value of your contract is highly dependent upon just the timing, just like market timing, things that you can't really necessarily know. You know, energy policy could change, radically in January. Like there's all kinds of like potential market forces that they might have some insight into. So that would be great to, similarly, like, are these the kinds of things we should worry about, or should we be worrying about something else? I think it would be great to meet with them.
Or not even worrying, explore. Just,
Sure.
Oh, yeah, okay. Welcome to Odenslaw. Could you identify yourself, please?
Thank you, Gail. I was going to do that too. Yeah.
Welcome.
We can't hear you if you're talking. The reason we need you to identify yourself is just so we have to document who is in the meeting, and Nate has to know who's the public participants are. So if you could just let us know your name, that would be great. And if you're a Shutesbury resident, that'd be great too.
And we don't have a what you call it, where you can write notes to each other.
No chat,
Yep.
no.
Chat, thank you. I knew there was a word for it. She's back, he's back, they're back. We cannot hear you if you're trying to speak. You're unmuted, but now you're muted. Unmuted.
I mean, if maybe they have a speaker problem or a microphone problem, they might be able to, if they want to be counted, can email their name to ECAC, the ECAC email address, perhaps.
Oh, very smart, Isaac. Good idea. Yeah, that's the downside of not having chat activated, which we can't control. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind, that would be helpful. Just so we can get that on the record. And if your microphone kicks in at some point, feel free to interrupt us. So Nate, it sounds like CCA update is complete. We can move on. Cool. And Isaac, you go to questions on CCA?
Yeah. I think just for Odin's Law, I think, what is it, ECAC at Shutesbury.com? .org, yeah. ECAC at Shutesbury.org.
Cool. Thank you, Isaac, for that. So I'm going to move us along to the climate leader program. It feels like forever ago. I think it was early July, it's June. But so Chris Mason had suggested that we talk to the Ashfield Energy Committee because they succeeded in they succeeded in passing the climate action requirements, the climate leader requirements in one town meeting, which I was not aware that one could do. So this woman, Alex, is the chair of the committee. She presented on a webinar that Mass Municipal Association aired, and the following week I met with her and we talked things through, which is very helpful. And I think just to sort of, it is more straightforward than the documentation makes it seem like. So just to sort of recount, there's 6 things that one has to do as a requirement as a municipality. Some of them we already have. So we have to be green community good standing, which I think we are. We have to have a local body that advises the municipality on clean energy and climate initiatives. So that's us. And then the other 4 are the things that we have to do. And so those are, we have to have a commitment to eliminate on-site fossil fuel use by 2050. We have to create a municipal decarbonization roadmap. We have to adopt a zero emission vehicle first policy. And we have to adopt the specialized opt-in code, building code. So those are the 4 things. What was interesting when I sent you all were things that Ashfield worked on. And to cut to the chase, really, what they ended up doing was DOER has templates that are recommended on their website. And so basically what Ashfield said was, if these are the things that are going to pass muster with DOER, we'll just adopt the templates because all the language is there.
Mhm.
And it made a lot of sense to me. As I told Alex, like in many situations, I hate using templates because they're not very responsive to the individual situation. Like when I was on school committee, I hated adopting, the Mass Association of School Committee policies because they're very generic. But I think in this case, it's appropriate because 1, it's already been vetted by DOER's council
Mhm.
and they're being recommended, and there's generic is fine. So in terms of the first one, the commitment for eliminating fossil fuel use, there's what I sent to you was the Shutesburyized version of, it's basically a resolution. And so they brought it to town meeting. It's not binding, just like any other resolution is not binding, but it's basically stating all these whereases, which creates the context. And then the punchline is, be it resolved that the members of Shutesbury Town Meeting call on town government to commit to, with appropriate support from the state and federal governments, to bring municipal net carbon emissions to 0 as quickly as reasonably possible with a target date of 2050. So there's lots of caveats. What Alex said is the whole idea of putting in there with appropriate support from state and federal governments that, if for some reason state and federal governments are not able to assist in this and the town can't afford it, then even though the resolution is not binding, we can step back from it. So it's an easier sell to say this is it's basically an aspirational statement of intent. And that passes muster. So I think it's, it'll, one sec, I think it'll foster conversation, but in terms of the concerns that Alex raised, which is people saying the town can't commit to something that it can't fiscally, we might get stuck in a corner, and this really sort of liberates us from that and sort of says this is where we're trying to go if all the pieces fall into place. But yeah, what were you going to say?
Well, the trick about zero fossil fuels, and this is what Stephen brought up, even if you have the heat pumps in the winter months, you're going to have the fossil fuel as a backup. That's the whole point of the mixed thing in the DOER graphic. So we cannot, in good conscience, say we want to get rid of all fossil fuel.
Yeah, well, I think that's we should, I'm just going to share this because it'd be easier and make it bigger so you can all see it actually. But Nate, go ahead. You're going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say I was on that that call where Ashfield presented their experience, and I'm glad you highlighted the templates, which simplifies things considerably. But I was especially struck by the parts of the presentation where they described kind of their strategic approach within the town to, I mean, they were staffing the public library a couple hours, several hours a week to answer any questions,
Oh my
sort of
God.
like an ask me anything about, these measures. They put together some very well designed, just from a graphic design perspective, handouts on each of these elements. And I just thought, and that's, I think they probably did some in-person or hybrid meetings on the subject as well in preparation, in a way that, like, I was super impressed. And with the effort that they went in to this process that delivered the result, it sounded like, with a fairly wide margin, not unanimously, but I do wonder, like, that's what I took inspiration from, was that legwork that they did in advance to facilitate an easy town meeting, relatively speaking. So I think we would do well to learn to take that away from their experience, in addition to these points about the templates.
Yeah, thank you. Gail,
Wait.
you,
Would that be in addition to public forums the way we've done before?
yeah, I
How are we
think,
going to get people to attend either one, I guess, is part of the question.
well, I think, their situation was a little bit different. In the sense that they had a very well attended and somewhat skeptical public forum where they had and so Alex ended up reaching out to local builders to sort of get them to understand and get them on board. And I think, I think based on our experience of having low attendance, I think the first challenge would be just to get people's attention.
Yeah.
And then we could figure out if among the attendance there's issues. But I think there's probably a middle ground where they got more people and they have a bigger constituency base. But they did some interesting things. Like one of the things that they did was, because it's a bigger town, they have young people who grew up there, who are trying to stay there. And they were a counterbalance to say the marginal cost of electrifying buildings is not the barrier. It's the cost of the houses anyway, regardless of what the source of fuel is. And so the argument the younger homeowners or potential homeowners were making is we support the electrification because that's not going to be the bump in the road. It's affording the houses, which is the bump in the road.
Yeah.
And so having different constituencies that can share is probably, it's a healthy conversation to have for sure. But I think they did this big push because I think in their forum, they realized that like there was vocal skepticism, which so far we haven't encountered. And I do think the only other thing I would say, Nate, is the fact that we had this aborted effort at town meeting here's an opportunity to do some education inadvertently. So, and I think, so with this one, what's easy about this, I mean, at first I was like, how are we going to commit to it? The fact that it's a resolution, it really is a lower bar. So people will have opinions and we can get all animated about it, but it's really not boxing anybody into anything if you really push it to the limit. There's enough qualifications. So I'm just going to run through them and then we get to pick up on the other ones if that's okay. Let's see, where's the next one? So the next one I was going to just do is the vehicle policy. Sure. So again, this is also a template, and the big issue here, which Alex pointed out, is
over to the other one. We can hear.
Odinslaw, we can hear you.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know how we did that, but we turned it on. It's Justin and Megan.
Okay.
We've lost all sense of image. We can't see you guys anymore. We can hear you talking, but I don't know how I was able to get the mic to come back on, but I did.
Cool.
Um,
And
don't
who
have an
are
image
you?
of
And who
anybody.
are you?
I beg your pardon?
And who are you? And are you in Shutesbury?
Yes, we are.
They're my
Justin and Megan.
neighbors. Yeah.
Yeah, residents of the community.
Great. Wonderful. Well, welcome. It's nice to hear your
Sorry,
voices.
I am somewhat computer illiterate, and I'm desperately trying to. I don't have an image of you guys anymore, but apparently you can hear us.
Yes.
Yeah, that is true.
That's
So,
kind of
well,
disturbing. All
All
right, so if I close everything out, I'm going to try to log back into you guys, and hopefully everything will be on point when we come back in.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
So with the zero emission first vehicle policy, the point of contention that Alex shared is for people saying there's
This
things
whole-
that we can't go electric on, so we can't agree to that. And the way it's set up in here is that there's exemptions. So it has exempt vehicles down here on the bottom. And so if there's not an equivalent, so, a dump truck, a plow, something like that, which is not available in electric, it's exempt. And then there's also, there's a pecking order. So the idea up here is that you look for vehicle first, but if you can't get it, then you drop down. So you could have mixed fuel hybrid if you can't get it, so like the whole conversation that came up at town meeting about, the police department saying that full electric doesn't meet the needs from a functional perspective. That can be debated, but what this policy basically says is that the town determines that the functions they need can't be met with an all electric, that you can go to the next level of priority, with fossil fuel being the absolute last, unless there's, no dump truck that is not fossil fuel. So again, it's sort of knowing what's really helpful talking to her, besides knowing that there's templates that we can use, is knowing what the points of objection are. And I think it all gets summarized as to people saying, great to think aspirationally, but don't lock us into something that we will trap the town and we can't do. And I don't think any of these do it, but it's good to be able to articulate what the out is. So in this situation, there's two outs. One, if there is no option for electric, you don't have to do it. And two, if the electric option is not going to meet the needs, then you're allowed to sort of go to something else. And so that, and this one is just I think this is, she said that based on the conversation with DOER, this could be a select board vote, but they wanted to go with the town meeting vote because obviously that's a better base of support and buy-in than just having the select board do it. But this was not required to have a town meeting vote.
So regarding the town's outs, one, it doesn't exist. Two, it doesn't meet the town's needs. Now, the definition of meeting the town's needs, how thoroughly is that articulated? Because I would think that like an undue financial burden on the town would be another consideration, right? Like, so say an all-electric fleet of police vehicles does exist, does meet the needs of the town, but is not within anywhere near the possible budget of the town. Like, is that kind of articulated in there somewhere?
Yeah, it's this part right here. So it says this policy shall not require a department to take action which conflicts with state, local, or federal requirements, nor mandate the procurement of products that do not perform adequately for the intended use, exclude adequate purchasing competition, or require the purchase of vehicles that are not commercially available. So or practical. So I think we should parse this a little bit more, Isaac, but I think I'm wondering about the adequate purchasing competition, if it's in there, like if it's
Maybe.
But I think, and again, this is we can tweak it. So so if we feel like it's important to call out the fact that it would create a financial burden on the town, we should add that. I think getting ahead of what the potential objections are, figuring out if we can meet them.
Yeah.
And then in addressing them, just, it makes for clearer sailing because we can respond to them. And I harken back to the CCA discussion at town meeting last year. I mean, Nate nailed it. He like went through all the things in advance. So all the questions that people were going to ask, he already had answered. You know, so I think it's a good model.
Yeah. Just try to see the road bumps. And I guess, Michael, if you're gonna keep your eyes on the waiting room, just to make sure, because it sounded like they're gonna try to get back in.
Thank you. I totally. I'm gonna stop sharing this, and then I can probably see it. No, they're not back yet. But
Okay.
thank you for Isaac.
No problem.
So that was, and then the last one was the specialized opt-in code, which, if you remember correct, let's see, no, that was commitment, decarbonization, roadmap I have to get to. So the opt-in code, if you remember, we got tripped up, one, because we didn't do the public hearing, but also because we realized that we had to do, or we thought we had to do a bylaw to that effect. And let me get this big again. Oh, come on. I hate when the things that you need to click on are covered by something else. Okay, there we go. So this is a bylaw. Again, it's a template. And so it talks about the purpose, it defines everything. It talks about the applicability. So it's literally one page, not very complex. And it lays it out. And the idea here, just as a reminder, was that by doing the bylaw and by referencing the 225 CMR 22 and 23, it makes it adaptable. So if the state updates anything, that we're tied to automatically, so we don't have to come back to town and have a revote. But it's pretty straightforward. And I mean, it doesn't take away the education component, because behind this is actually the substance. But the thing that DOER needs for us to do is to approve this. In order to approve this, we have to explain it again to the town, which you've already done twice in the public hearing and then the town meeting. But for just in terms of like, I will say in the spring, before talking to Alex and watching that webinar, I thought it was really daunting. But this is a discrete thing to do. It's on the warrant article as a bylaw. And we explain it if it gets voted as a bylaw, and it only requires, because it's a general bylaw, it's only a majority vote, so it's not a big lift in that regard. And then the only other thing that's required is a municipal decarbonization roadmap. And I was really confused by that. And that was one that was a little daunting. It's like, how do we build a roadmap? We don't have the information. We haven't gotten the commitment. It seems like a very cart before the horse kind of thing. The way Alex explained it is that their DOER, and I think it's the Green Communities Division, has a grant program municipalities can apply for to get a consultant to do a decarbonization roadmap. So just like we did MVP, where we applied, we wrote the policy and then we applied for the grant, and then the grant meant that DOER paid for the consultant. It'll be the same kind of thing where there's a pre-vetted list of consultants who do decarbonization roadmaps. What Alex explained in Ashfield, they applied for and got approved for this grant before they became a climate leader program community. So there's not a requirement that you get in, because otherwise it's a catch-22. Like if you had to meet all the requirements before you actually could apply, it wouldn't make sense. And that was like the light bulb of like, we can be on the road. Yeah. So, and we don't even have to complete it. I think we just have to be approved. Like there's taking the steps to do the roadmap that I think we would be approved for. Or if we approved everything else and then we're in queue to get the grant, I think somewhere in that process, they give us the check mark. Or it could be that we have the roadmap and then they give us the check mark, but we're allowed to go for the money and we get assistance professionally to do that. So all of a sudden that became a doable thing. So I'm feeling like we can go forward this fiscal year. And the question is just in terms of, I mean, like I saw maybe it's tonight. I saw something, the select board's having a meeting soon about some emergency special town meeting for something.
That's
I don't know
tonight.
what. Yeah, and I was like, oh, should we try to piggyback on that? And I sort of don't think so,
September?
because yeah, I think the education buy-in process is going to require a little bit more time, but objectively speaking, we could roll out these templates in a week. Like it's actually not very hard. It's all the stuff that you talked about, Nate, of like getting people on board and getting materials and explaining. And whether if we have a winter special town meeting, we could probably plan for that. If not, we could do the annual, but it seems quite doable. Nate,
Can we, I know we're like going over a little bit, but can we like develop a plan for having a public hearing or meeting that does check the box for these purposes? Like when should we try to do that?
it's a good question. I think it's part of the broader timeline. So I think, what I would say we could do is in the next month or so, finalize these documents. So they're, like a finalized draft. And then, because I know for zoning stuff, there's a timeline between the public hearing and the town meeting that you can't exceed. I don't know if that's true for general bylaws. I'd have to check, but even just practically speaking, like you wouldn't want to do a public hearing in September and then not having vote to town meeting because no one will remember in the May. So if we do the work and we have it sort of queued up, we could actually use the time to sort of figure out the education materials and just get it ready so that if there is a winter town meeting, then we say, okay, if it's going to be in January, let's do the public hearing end of November or whatever it is and sort of go from there. So I don't have an immediate question. I think we need to figure out, but most certainly between the four of us, we should remember that we have to do a public hearing now that the other good update, which is the only update, is that the select board approved our new charge. So thank you all for your input. So we're a solid quorum because we only have 5 official members, which is great. But so I'm not sure how I got onto that one, but I think if we do the work, if we're agreed, I didn't want to go forward, but if we're agreed that this makes sense as a trajectory to sort of shoot for the climate leader program with these parts, we can, I'm happy to finalize the documents and send them out and say, here, these are the drafts, and then figure out both an education plan and in terms of materials and timing and stuff like that, and be ready to go when it makes sense. But what do you all think about that?
Yeah, I think that it would be great to prepare for this instead of kind of kicking the can down the road and not being ready for when a special meeting comes up.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like you're fading.
I am. I've had a tough 2 weeks and I got a positive COVID test today. So
Oh,
capped it off. So I'm ready for
okay.
bed.
Wow, you buried the lead there, Gail. I hope you're feeling better.
Really? You should have told us that at the beginning.
Yeah.
God, I'm so sorry to hear that. You and Penny can text each other.
Yeah.
God. Well,
Well,
that's a good
maybe-
reason to wrap up and do minutes and then call it a meeting.
Yeah, I just sent the updated minutes with the minor updates that were done. Nothing earth shattering.
Okay, let's open them now. And so do you all since
Do you remember the meeting?
Yeah,
It was very minor, like, more grammatical than substantive changes.
It was June 18th was the meeting, so we can move to approve them and get them in the hopper, or we can, if people want to postpone it till next time. Any strong feelings?
Let's do it.
Okay, so I want to move
on
to
board.
approve.
I move to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Okay.
I'll
June
second.
18th. Great. Any discussion? Hearing none. Isaac, how do you vote?
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
Gail,
Aye.
I'm an aye. And
Isaac, can you send him some?
Ron?
No.
They're in the, I just sent them to ECAC,
Okay, great,
the
thanks.
general email.
Great.
Sorry.
So Gail, I'm gonna give you the honors to move to adjourn.
I move we adjourn for this evening.
Anyone want a second?
I second. Oh, I'll third it then. I'll third it.
Okay.
Cool.
Nate, sorry, Nate, I will send you, I think we need to figure out the next meeting, right? Schedule the next meeting, but then also I'll email you the names of of Justin and Megan.
Cool. So do you want, I always forget to figure out the next meeting thing. Do you want to do that now? You want to do it on email? Or Gail, what's your preference in terms of,
I can do it now. Let me pull up my calendar.
okay, cool. So what I would suggest, just given where we're at, is maybe do it in earliest September after Labor Day sometime. So to get, since we're basically in August, so just rather than do it the last week of August and I won't be here. Does that work for you all?
Yeah,
And so.
So that's September 3rd, is that what you're saying?
I'm thinking probably the 10th. I think Monday is Labor Day.
Yeah, that's better, yeah.
Yeah.
that's the
And,
presidential debate allegedly.
oh, really? September 10th? Huh. Okay.
What time does it
So
start?
we'll be early
It'll be
enough.
9.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
problem.
At least one of the participants can stay up that late.
Okay, so
September
our
10th?
usual 5 o'clock time.
Yeah.
This
Cool.
Put
works.
it,
Perfect.
okay.
Sounds great. Okay, so I'm going to call the roll for adjourning. Nate,
Aye.
Isaac,
Aye.
Gail,
Aye.
I'm an aye. We are officially adjourned. Thank you all for another fun meeting. And, have a good rest of the
Thank you.
night.
See you
do
guys.
have
Feel
fun
better.
meetings. Yeah.
Feel better, Gil.
Feel better,
Thank you.
Gail.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good night, everybody.